The Pilgrims, Part 1, Arrival, Chapter 6. Mary and Remember Allerton ran as fast as they could towards their house. Their stepmother, Mrs. Fear Allerton, was waiting for them. As their father had pointed out many times, it was not a good idea to keep a woman whose name was Fear waiting. In the late afternoon, the children had gone out to collect firewood. After gathering the wood, they had stopped to play in the forest with their friends, Love and Wrestling Brewster. Love and Wrestling Brewster were Pilgrim brothers. They had also gone into the forest to collect firewood. Like many of the Pilgrim children, these children had been given special names at birth. Their names often indicated what kind of person their parent hoped they would become. Sometimes their name revealed something that had happened at the time of their birth. Remember had been given her name because her mother had said that she would always remember and never forget her birth. Wrestling wasn't happy with his name. He didn't feel much like a wrestler. Wrestling planned to change his name when he was older. He was going to change it to John. He had been a weak baby, and his father had given him the name, hoping that it would make him strong. When the children had gathered as much firewood as they could carry, they dropped it into a large pile and played a game of hide and seek. Then they climbed trees and collected sweet berries to eat. They pretended to be English pirates capturing Spanish galleons laden with gold. It wasn't until the sun had begun to set that they realized they had been gone for quite some time. The children anxiously gathered up their firewood and made their way home. Four years earlier, all four of these children had survived the journey aboard the Mayflower from England. They had arrived in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1621. Their parents were English separatists. English separatists were people who were unhappy with the Church of England and wanted to start their own church. They wanted to be free to worship God in their own way. The King of England, James I, was the head of the Church of England. He harassed anyone who did not obey the rules of the church. As a result, many of the English separatists left England. The children's families had first tried living in the Netherlands, but they were not happy there either. Finally, they and others set out across the Atlantic Ocean to establish their own colony in North America. Because they were willing to travel to a faraway place for their religious beliefs, they began calling themselves Pilgrims. The journey across the ocean, and the first winter in the colony, was now just a terrible memory. So many people had died either on the ship or within the first months of being in Plymouth. They had died from disease, hunger, and the extreme cold weather. Mary, Remember, Love, and Wrestling had witnessed the death of many pilgrims. Worst of all was the death of the girls' beloved mother. After she had died, their father had tried to comfort them as best he could. The girls had felt that their hearts had been broken. Their brother Bartholomew had hidden in the forest for several days. He had refused to come back, no matter how often they called his name. He finally came back, though. When spring arrived, Bartholomew had helped their father build a house and plant crops. The Pilgrims had not intended to settle in Plymouth. They had been planning to go to Virginia, but their ship had been blown off course. It had taken them 2 months to cross the ocean. Mary, Remember, Wrestling, and Love had wondered if they would ever see dry land again. When they finally arrived, it was winter time, and they were in an unknown land hundreds of miles north of their intended destination. This place was much colder than Virginia. Even more alarming was that many of the Pilgrims had noticed that the soil was not very good for farming. If they could not farm, they would have no chance of surviving in this new land. The children's new home was not at all what they had imagined it to be. Now that the children are no longer living in England or the Netherlands, in what ways do you think their lives have changed?